Hey folks, this is Shane from Performance EV. Today we're going to get our power steering back up and running. Hey folks, welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for joining us. Slightly different intro today because unlike most times I'm recording this after I've done all the work and recorded all the video. The video that I've got today turned out to be into a bit more of a beast than I'd originally planned. It was going to just be me doing a bunch of things on the car, but it's kind of morphed into a bit of a how-to video. So I guess welcome to my video on how to install electric power steering pump into a car that didn't already have it. So obviously this channel is about EV conversions and it's a very appropriate thing there, but to be honest, if you're someone who's doing any sort of engine swap, or you're maybe taking your car to the track and you want power steering after having deleted your accessory belt, this is just as relevant. So yeah, so this is going to be how to electrify your power steering. So I guess first off, background, the power steering in a lot of modern cars, certainly up to 5-10 years ago, was pretty much always driven from the accessory belt that ran off the motor. So the power steering pump would be bolting somewhere onto the motor with a little cog or a little wheel running off it that attached to another wheel that was run off the shaft of the engine. So in removing the engine, or in places where maybe you've decided to get rid of that belt, you of course have no power going to that power steering pump and you have to come up with a different solution. So for me, that's been to go with adding an electric power steering pump in. So that means retaining the same power steering rack and some of the pipe work, but not actually using the existing pump. So I'm getting a brand new pump in place, some additional pipe work, and then hooking that up to the rack. Turned out to be a bit more of an involved process than I'd initially thought, but was really interesting. So I'm going to take you along for the journey and help you see what goes into this if you're doing your own conversion, or you're doing an engine swap on your car and you want to see what's involved in changing the power steering over. Hopefully this video will help you. So this is kind of going to be part of a bit of a mini series. I'm going to do a similar video, I think, on the getting the brake booster back. So again, the vacuum for a brake booster for a lot of cars runs off the engine. You get rid of the engine, you no longer have the vacuum, and you have to find another way to do it. So look out for that in the coming weeks. So yeah, I think with that, let's jump into it.
So here we're looking at the power steering rack, or at least the edge of the power steering rack, the tie rod that comes out of it to connect to the wheel. You can see, the only other thing you can see from out here is two pipes coming off it, which we'll look at on the other side, and going out to the back of the car where the power steering pump used to be. So if we look down the tunnel, you can see all the way to the other end of the rack with the pipes running along the length of it. Oh, and a pebble. Okay, so the pipes are coming from the far side of the rack where the steering wheel attaches, and the fluid comes all the way along there, along the side of the rack, and then up and out towards the back of the car. Now there are other options for doing power steering. There are some modern cars that come with a fully electric steering rack and don't actually need then the pump going into the rack here, but I want to minimize the number of components that I need to replace as part of this effort. So simply replacing the pump while keeping the existing rack seems like the best option. Let's go look at the other side. So here we're looking at the driver's side, right hand side on this car of the power steering rack. So the pipes you can see here are the ones that we could make out on the other side, but this is the point at which they actually attach to the rack itself. So you can see them there bolted into the upright part of the the power steering rack. So there are two pipes, one for high pressure going into it and one slightly lower pressure coming out. And then they kind of loop up and over before converting from hardline to soft hose for a bit of the journey, I guess, to get around something, and then going back to hardline further down. And we're going to replace some of this system as we go into trying to fit our own kind of custom power steering setup to the car. So one of the key things that you need to do in this sort of setup is figure out where you're going to put the pump. I'm going to go for right here, where the brake booster goes on a US or European car. There are a number of different points at which we should be able to get pipes through. So we'll look at how the pump fits in this particular space and then see where we might want to pull pipes through. Do they come in through the firewall here, or do we look elsewhere in the trunk, so in through the wheel arches, from kind of in front of the wheels, and see where we can get it in with the least effort.
So here's what the Porsche steering rack looks like out of the car. This is a replacement one that I bought secondhand because my one looks in really bad shape. So basically these are the two power steering hoses go into the unit here, and this is where the signal where the steering wheel connects to. So you can see on the two hoses they are slightly different, and you can tell which one is the really high pressure one for the inbound power steering fluid and which one is the return. So basically this is as if we're looking at the front of the car. It's a right-hand drive car, being for the UK. So what we'll need to have done is get these pipes cut off and then new ones crimped on of a similar standard that will then take this fluid, send it out along the power steering rack, or along beside the power steering rack, up into the boot compartment where we're going to install our power steering pump. So this is the one that everyone seems to use. It's a power steering pump from an Opel Zafira, but that's not all it is. So this is again a TRW manufactured piece, and is actually the one that is used for Porsche Cup racing. So where people have taken a street 911 and they're racing it in a single make series, they'll generally delete the ancillary belt, so things like the power steering need to be driven by a 12-volt pump, and this is the one that gets sold specifically for that purpose. They sell those for hundreds of pounds, dollars, whatever your local currency is. This one cost me 30. So it's got the same two hydraulic connections. We've got our high pressure inlet and then our lower pressure outlet. So this can be held on with relatively low pressure fixing. This one will need that crimped on connection. So again, we're going to see if we can get it cut off and a new section crimped on, or a new pipe that I can put into the connector here. So in terms of fitment in the boot, this is the space I'm going for. So where the CD changer used to be, this is where the brake booster would be on a left-hand drive car. So it's a suitable space for this type of hydraulic equipment. I'm going to see if I can get a cover plate from a left-hand drive car, so from somewhere else in Europe. So this will be where the power steering pump will live. I will fabricate a bracket for it just to keep it off the base so that there aren't any vibrations coming through. And then what we'll probably end up doing is actually coming into the space here from the inner footwell, obviously with a a heavy duty grommet to stop anything coming, any liquid or anything like that coming through. So what we'll have then is our power steering pipes coming out here, sneaking up around this point here. These are all going to be variously removed, and then going in up around here into the boot area, and that should give us then the power steering that we need to actually be able to drive this car. So now I think I just need to figure out what length of pipe we would need to get made up, and then I can go find a hydraulic firm that can get it created for me. So as luck would have it, I managed to track down someone selling a left-hand drive brake booster cover pretty cheap on eBay. So basically this replaces the kind of standard cover you've got on this side of a right-hand drive Porsche 911, which is covering the ABS pump and all the pipes and everything, and replacing it with something that covers up on the rest of Europe and US models, the ABS pump and the brake booster. So hopefully this will allow me to find the optimal placement for our power steering pump, which will then allow me to figure out what way the pipes need to go to get to it. So it took a bit of back and forth, but that's kind of where it should fit. And I think that'll make for a pretty neat kind of trunk area. This space wasn't really used for anything anyway, because I had the 6 CD changer, which I have no use for. So yeah, I think that's going to work. Now I just need to lift this off and see where the pipes have actually ended up and if it's actually feasible. So that's not actually too bad. Pipes are coming out here near the power steering pump. There's a decent amount of room, and also all the mounting points are in okay locations. I can probably add one of the mounting points onto this bracket for the power steering pump, and then there are 2 more points that I can add something to there and there. I'm going to need to start measuring for hoses. So we're using sections of rubber hose to try and mimic our power steering lines. So I'm working it out in sections because I don't want to have to drill through the body just yet. But we'll tape it all together, figure out what the total length is, and then use that to get a hose made up.
So looking at the steering rack again, up on the bench, we've got the new one here, and we've got the pipes that are coming out of it. So now that we've looked at how we're going to fit the hoses, we can mark where we're going to cut these pipes to get the hose coming out at the right angle, to ensure that it's not too stressed or stretched or kinked or anything like that. So we'll get these marked up and then get the Dremel out to cut them to size. Now we need to get the bolt out so that we can actually take the pipes and disconnect them from the rack. So there we have it. The high pressure hose is out. So this is the feed from the pump into the rack. So it takes the highest pressure of anything in the system. I'll see if we can get the low pressure hose out now, but I'm not too worried about it. It doesn't have to come off just yet. So the low pressure hose didn't want to come off, but it's the high pressure one that we need to get the professionally made pipe for. So now moving on to the pump itself, the high pressure is bolted into the side of it, whereas the low pressure is just held on with a Jubilee clip basically. This is pretty loose, so I suspect someone might have had this apart before, even though they cut the pipe. So here are the two bits of pipe that will form the starting and ending point of our high pressure hose. We've got one from the pump and one into the rack. So now we need to go and find someone who can help us build the rest of it out. It's about 2 meters missing.
We've got our pipes measured up. People keep on recommending this particular hydraulic repair place or chain to me when it comes to getting the power steering done. So we're going to head for a spin and go and see if we can get a pipe made up. Okay, made it back with our power steering hose here. So it turns out the Porsche end was a bit of a challenge. It's very soft aluminium, but looks like they managed to get this to hold on. So hopefully that will work. So yeah, now we obviously need to get into the car, but at least with these removable joiners, I'll hopefully have an easier time getting it through the various places that I need it to. So now we can start running our new power steering line from the steering rack to the steering pump. So we're just test fitting it at the moment. It's going to be a little bit of a pain to fit properly because I have to disconnect the pipes from the steering rack while it's in place here. We'll see how we get on. So I'm actually really happy with how the fitment is on this side. Obviously we need to tighten it down and everything, but I'll only do that once everything's secure. But there's enough give in the hose that it's not going to kink or anything at any point around the route that it's taking. Under the other side of the car to see if we could drop the combined steering rack with its hoses without dropping the subframe as well. I don't really see a way of doing it, but I want to try and test the power steering as soon as possible. So what I'm going to try and do is disconnect the cables or the hoses in situ. So we'll try and get access to the steering rack in behind here, so I can undo the bolt of that covers the where the hoses go in, and then see if I can just yank them out as is. So we'll try and start by trying to get these sections of coolant hose out of the way. There's probably going to be some nasty stuff in there because, well, the coolant was shot. But yeah, we'll get those out of the way, see if we can then access the bolt I need, and if we can do that, then I'll see if I can get the hoses out, one step at a time. So now I can get a slightly clearer view into where the two pipes are coming from here and entering into the steering rack. So it's, you can see down there then, this bolt is the one that I need to undo to then take off the cover plate, to then hopefully be able to yank the pipes out. Who knows? Let's see if we can do it. Alright, that was a nice try, but no avail. Looks like I've gotten pretty close to rounding off that bolt. So yeah, it's not going to work. I had thought about trying to preserve these pipes, see if I could sell them, recoup some of the cost of getting a custom pipe made up, but they're actually in pretty bad condition. The compression fitting here on the return line is all corroded and broken. So I think what I'll do is I'll just cut these and take out the rack with these in place, cap these two off and hold them somewhere neatly, and then we'll just put in the new rack that I got with the new fitting that I got installed for it, rather than killing time trying to preserve something that's not worth preserving. Pipes here didn't want to move. What I'm going to do is just disconnect this entire shaft from the car. So first thing to do is there's a 13mm bolt you can see just above the black collar there, which basically attaches the steering wheel to the power steering rack. So I've started loosening that. I'm going to continue to get that a little bit looser. That should come off. I've got the steering wheel in fully centered at the moment, so we're going to make sure it stays like that, and then we can adjust the steering rack when it's off the car to make sure, or the new steering rack when it's off the car to make sure it's also fully centered. So next up are two 15mm bolts up underneath the subframe, one on each side that bolts directly into the power steering shaft. So we get those undone, and then cut the wires, or cut the pipes, and get the ball joints on the tie rods out, and then we'll see if we can wriggle this out of the way. Why is it when I want to show how difficult a job is, the bit I get on camera always goes really smoothly? I can tell you the other side was not that simple. So we've disconnected everything but the pipes from this steering rack. Now we just need to see if we can get it out. So there we have our two steering racks. The original one from the car. A lot of corrosion on it, just surface I guess on the outside because it's some sort of alloy or aluminium, but like the pipes are pretty corroded, and I know I was having trouble getting the hoses out as well. And then we've got my slightly better nick, new to me one. Very little corrosion. Yes, there's a bit of dirt and that here and there, but it's not a major issue. And also I know that I can disconnect and reconnect the pipes on this one, which will make it a lot easier. So I need to cut down the return pipe here, so I can put my own fitting onto the end of it, but that's not too much of a hassle. So now we need to just get these so that they're looking more or less the same length, so the tie rods are in the right place. So I'm going to attach the tie rod ends and see how close these line up, and then we'll see about getting this one back in the car. Okay, so we've got our high pressure line pretty much in place, and obviously we're just waiting to get the steering rack properly reinstalled before we fully wire it up. Now I want to get the low pressure wire in place, or hose in place. So this is return hose for power steering. So it's also nice and strong and able to handle the pressure, but it doesn't have to handle as high a pressure as the rest of it. So we've got it here. I found a sealing grommet in behind the light bulb or light fitting here, which I've taken out, and it's the perfect size for this. We'll need to get some sort of just rubber that I can put around the actual metal so it doesn't actually cut through the hose, but we'll just put it in as is for now. So I'm just going to feed it from here down into the in behind the wheel arch, or into the wheel arch, and then down to where the power steering goes, and then we'll actually run it alongside the rack underneath the car. So here's where the light fits on the 996, and this tray is basically goes underneath the light, and it just slots onto the electrical contact here. But basically there's a hole just in behind this kind of mounting point, and I think as long as I get my angles right, I can actually get the hose to go down behind it, so it won't even snag on the headlight or anything, and then we'll pull it out from behind the wheel liner or wheel arch liner. Alright, that's looking pretty neat. Now let's just see if we can get the headlamp to fit. Alright, so we've got our high pressure and our low pressure lines here. Let's put the power steering pump in place and see if we can get them wired up. Okay, power steering pump in place and plumbed in. Now we just need to finish reconnecting the rack itself. So we've fed our pipe through, it's all good. Now we just want to get it connected. I'm probably going to connect it at the length it is at the moment. It might be a little bit too long, but at least it allows me to make sure that it's comfortable, for want of a better word, and not flexing in any strange ways. And then we can look at getting the steering rack back in place fully, and then see about testing the system. So we've got our pipes plumbed in, so we've got our high pressure connected to the hose. That's connected into the steering rack. We've got the hose from the steering rack, returning from the rack to the pump, connected to the return line, and then both of those the hard line parts are bolted back into the steering rack. So now we just need to get this into place. Alright, we've got the rack bolted down. Still need to properly bolt it to the steering column, but it's annoying me, so I've given up on that for the moment, and I'm just going to get it bolted back in so we can test things, and then I'll sort it out at another stage. Alright, we've got our pump plumbed in. It's just sitting in place at the moment. I'll make some sort of arrangements for it to be bolted in at some point in the future, but for now it's just going to sit as it is. We've got a little battery here to connect it to, and let's see if it works. Probably should have checked this outside the car, but well, that'd be boring. Awesome, it works. We don't want to run it dry for too long, so what I'm going to do is put in some fluid, and then see what happens. Hopefully no leaks will appear. If they do, we'll deal with them. Alright, so we're going to fill it up with some fluid. I've got a bottle here. One thing to say on fluid for power steering is, and I've learnt this only recently, you don't always want to buy power steering fluid. Different cars require different, I guess, fluids in there. So for the Porsche, actually it requires, well, it says it requires only the fluids by one particular manufacturer, but nowadays you can buy other manufacturers' variants of the same, but it's not generally sold as power steering fluid, it's sold as hydraulic fluid, which is bizarre. But the one thing they did recommend was don't use any of the combined ATF and power steering fluid that you can buy, because they contain chemicals and detergents and stuff that can actually do damage to the steering rack. So I'd say if you are going for a kind of hybrid system here where you got bits from one car and another, just check the specs on each of them, see if any of them have any special requirements, and I guess base your choice on fluids on whichever one is the most easily damaged, I guess. So fortunately both this unit and the Porsche steering rack seem to require the same, was it CHF11S style fluid. So this is a generic equivalent thereof. We'll just fill it up and go from there. Alright, we've got some fluid in the tank. Let's spin her up. Can feel all sorts of air bubbles flowing through this. Okay, looks like we've got a little bit of a leak here, so I'll need to just tighten that down slightly. Hopefully that will get rid of it. That's the one I'm least worried about though. The other one seems to be fine, which is great. And yeah, the pitch definitely changed as I tried to turn the wheels, so it seems like the power steering's working. Obviously we'll need to get it down on the ground to test that properly. So that all seems to be working now. I've tightened up the remaining bolt that was leaking a little bit, or the nut that was leaking a little bit, and I've run it again since, and that seems to be working. There don't seem to be any leaks coming from the down near the rack. Obviously we'll need to see what happens when we actually get it on the ground, so that'll be, I think, something for sometime in the next few weeks. I think maybe while I have the car up on the jack and stuff, I'll probably try and get the brake vacuum working as well, and then I'll have power steering, power brakes whenever I want to drive the car out of the garage to make space for other things. So really productive few days in the end, but we're there now. It's something that I felt I had to do after trying to drive the car without power steering. I thought I'd be fine. That wasn't the case. It was an absolute beast and horrible to drive. Or certainly at low speeds, which is all I can do because it isn't registered. So I'm looking forward to hopefully getting it back outside sometime soon and seeing what it's like with power steering. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. For those of you who are kind of new to the channel, this is some of the style of stuff that I do, but I also do the videos just going through my progress of converting this car into an electric vehicle. So we're getting closer, and I hope if you've enjoyed it, you'll consider subscribing, hit the like button if you've enjoyed it, and as always, comments are always appreciated. But till next time, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.